What are you drinking today?
It's not a cup of trauma, let's put it that way. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Remind podcast. My name's David Masterton, and I have to the left or the right of me or beside me, anyway, I'm going to point that way because that's where you are, Dr. Ashley Morland. How are you going today, Dr. Ash?
Hey, Dave. I'm awesome. How are you going?
Feeling like I want to get things done. That's the overall
Ooh,
mood I've got. And that's a wonderful
hmm,
segue for what we're going to talk about.
interesting. I wonder what
Product.
that might be.
It's going to be about productivity, actually,
Hmm.
and how some of these hacks that people have seen or show sometimes don't work.
It's so frustrating, isn't it? It's so frustrating when you know that there's something that you want to do, but you put it off and self-sabotage, and it just doesn't happen.
Look, you're talking to one. I've got to say, procrastination. If my middle name wasn't Rodney, it would be procrastination. There's
Really?
something about, I was about to say I love it, but I don't. It's just sort of something I'm very familiar with. And it comes from just either I want to have, I don't want to worry about it and I'll do something else. Or sometimes I just need that rush to get it done.
Mm.
And so, very interesting. So, I think today we wanted to talk about the productivity techniques that don't necessarily work when we're talking about planners and programs and systems. In their own right, they do work, but what they don't tackle is something deeper, which you're going to sort of pack. So, did you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I've got so many questions.
Oh,
When you're procrastinating, what are your go-to? Like, how do you know you're procrastinating?
when there's fear involved,
How do you know
one
there's fear
one
involved?
hundred
How are you
percent.
feeling?
So, for example, you can, for me, when I create corporate videos, there's the most fun is the planning stage and getting the deposit. That's like the peak excitement level that I get
The
out of that.
absolute, like, you are getting the prime drug in that
Yep,
moment. Hello,
yep, just
dopamine.
gets all sucked up. The worst part, and I'll say, and I'll skip a few parts, but I'll go. Then the worst part is having filmed everything and then having to edit to put it together to then give it to the client. That's
Mm.
the all-time low, is doing that part. Actually filming and capturing all of it is fun because it's quite a rush. Because for me, a lot of it isn't so scripted. Parts of it are, but a lot of what sort of comes together is very organic. There's a general theme about what they want to present, the story they want to tell, all of those things. But the way it comes about is we go along and see what happens. Now, once I've done that and now it's time to edit and then put it all together, there's this sort of dread of, oh, what have I captured? Is it going to be good enough? How are they going to respond to it? I'll worry about later. I'll do something else. I'll do, it's not like when you're in the video business, you don't always come home after shooting something and straight away dive into the project. All your clients would love you to do that, but it never happens because you're probably managing a few projects at any one time. But there's definitely that sort of dread. And what if it's not good enough? Because I'm also, as I'm learning more and more, because I want to learn more and more, I'm also fairly difficult on myself. I have a high expectation. I think we might need to put a link into the perfectionism video
Yeah, and I was thinking about
from
fear of
last week.
rejection as well, because doesn't
All
it,
of that.
it all comes into it, doesn't it? That's why that stuff is so foundational.
Absolutely. And so what then happens is I procrastinate, thinking it's easier for myself. And I find that the sooner, like the closer the deadline gets and the more pressure there is, it starts to feel a little bit more like, would we say overwhelm? I'd say maybe pressure. I'm not sure if it's overwhelm. But then it's almost like I need that pressure to get worse than the procrastination to then get it done. And then I get it done. I then enjoy the process, don't know why I'm procrastinating over it. And I haven't had a bad feedback at all for any of the stuff that I've done. So, and it's all made up in my head. Like when I look at what I do, I want it to be the best possible, but then I have these really big expectations of what I should be capable of and what they're spending. And it's just, for me, it's absolutely got to do with fear. I never procrastinate on something I really enjoy doing because I'm driven, I'm motivated, I'm capable, all of those things, right? I could sit down and write a diary about it. I could get a planner out. I know what to do. I just don't want to do it.
I love this. And I feel like all of our listeners will be sitting there going, oh my gosh, you're just speaking about me. It's me. And
Well,
I'm sitting here as well, listening to you talking about that, going, oh, it's also me. I could relate to that in so many ways. I'm so much better with it now. But in my younger life, pre a lot of healing, my whole life was procrastination. My life was like consistent leave things to the last minute because I needed that exhilarating rush to be able to get me across the line. And, you know, I would be the one submitting assignments 2 minutes to midnight and things like that. And, you know, the amazing thing, I found it really fascinating that I could read an assignment question. I could sit down with it, you know, 2 months before it was due, and I could sit there and read it. And I go, I don't really know what they're asking. I don't really get it. And I'd sit there and I might fluff about and I go, nah, I don't really get it. And then a month passes, I haven't made any more progress, and I'm sitting there and I'm going, oh, I've just got this mental blank. Like I got nothing. I don't know. How could I do my other assignments in this one? I just don't know what they're asking.
you
And
still have
then
plenty of time, by the way. A month is a
got plenty of time to do
huge
it.
amount of time.
I
You can
could
do it
have
20 times over.
Yeah, I had so much, and all with well intentions of being prepared and getting myself organized. And this time I did 10 years of uni. 10 years of uni. Imagine how many things that I had to produce and how many deadlines I had to meet. And every semester, I promised myself this time it's going to be different. This time, I'm going to be organized and I'm going to start everything early and I'm going to do it differently and it's going to happen every semester. And the funny thing is that I wouldn't. I would sit down and I'd try to do it. But here's the amazing thing. When it came down to a few days before it was due and I could sit down and I'd look at it, I would feel the physical symptoms of overwhelm in my body.
Ooh.
I would feel the rush of stress hormones starting to surge in my body. And then if I sat down.
What does that feel like? Let's just before you go in that little
I
bit.
love that question. Let
Let's
me close
just
my eyes. I feel like my limbs feel heavier. My heart feels faster. My mind races a little bit more, but it's almost like, oh man, it's like an exhilarating, addictive race instead of that rumination, low key, annoying, busy mind. But it's like it's come alive, it's come online. And I feel that rush, almost like adrenaline through my body. So
What?
adrenaline and cortisol feel a bit different.
Okay. What about like your sort of your tummy, stomach, abdomen area? Does anything
Yeah,
happen
I
there?
don't tend to get a lot of symptoms in my tummy. For me, it's
Because for
chest, throat,
for
head.
right for
But
me, it
tummy
starts
is
in the
common.
abdomen, the stomach. It's
Yeah.
almost like a shivering,
Okay.
but a low, not a low, but like a quiet shivering, almost like an excitement that sort of starts there, and the more anxious I get, it comes up higher. But anyway, it was just that was really good, just about that sort of explanation. So anyway, you get that sense
Yeah.
of
Yes, I
overwhelm.
get, I
That
get that
them
sense of like adrenaline in my body. And here's what would happen. The closer the deadline got, the more adrenaline and cortisol is coursing through my body, and the more alive I felt, the more alert I felt. All of a sudden, the exact same assignment question that I had sat there for 2 months, sitting there going, I've got no idea what this is asking me, it's not making any sense. All of a sudden, I could smash out thousands of words in one go in an all nighter, completely hyper focused, not even remember to eat, and get a high distinction on that assignment. It was
damn.
phenomenal. And this is something that I observe a lot. So there's so many different things here, Dave. Maybe I need to get a pen and paper and note these down so that we can circle back to them. Because the things that are coming to my mind is, first of all, what is it? So one of the things that we actually wanted to cover in today's episode is actually understand a bit about the science of productivity and how our brains, like reward system and neurochemicals and attentional mechanisms, actually allow us to stay focused and to actually be productive and not be busy. Busy and productive are not the same thing. Because I could be busy alphabetizing my notes and color coding my thing and creating pretty symbols for this and planning out minute by minute my day. I could fill a day being busy. Absolutely, I could do that. I could literally spend a day researching productivity tools and, research planning processes and all this stuff, but it wasn't moving me closer towards the goal. It wasn't actually making me any closer to having a done product.
It's
And
probably
so,
a bit like process versus progress, really, is what you're talking about.
yes,
You're just
yeah.
processing stuff, as in not like mentally, but you're doing stuff. You're in the process of doing stuff, but you're not progressing
No,
the ultimate goal, which is to get the assignment
no.
done,
Yeah,
is to get the video done, is to do whatever it is you need,
to
needs
meet
to
the
get done.
deadline. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And so it was really interesting to me. I really wanted to start understanding what was going on for me in that time. And I'm a neurophysiologist, so I wanted to understand the brain. I wanted to understand the mechanisms of what was happening. And there's a couple of different things that I think we should touch on. So the first thing is, where should I go first? Maybe the first thing is the neurochemical thing.
Okay.
So I made it really clear that it was very evident that as the stress hormones started to surge through my body, it was like I came alive. It was like the front part of my brain, where all the thinking and all the logic and all the productivity, executive function, anyone with ADHD, this is the part of your brain that is messing you up. This is the part of the brain that is
Right.
really, really, really impacting your capacity to have order, to have attentional focus, to have high levels of cognitive function, to improve your memory, and all these kinds of things. And something that I've learned over the years in my research is that we can release dopamine. Now, dopamine is our reward hormone. It's like we are all drug addicts, right?
Like the feel good.
Yeah. And we're all drug addicts because we literally go through our lives driving our actions and behaviors to get our drug hit. Dopamine we get in response to reward, but we can release dopamine off the back of cortisol or off the back of oxytocin. Now, cortisol is our stress hormone. Oxytocin is our safety and connection hormone. But here's the thing. I have a brain, fully acknowledging here that I definitely have the diagnostic label of ADHD. But here's why.
Neurodivergent, yes.
Yes. Here's why. My brain was wired at a really young age, probably before I was even born, in my mother's womb. If I look back and understand what I know about my parents' relationship, what I know about what my home life would have been like while my mother was pregnant with me. Now, I wasn't born, but based on what I know about my family and I know about the relationship my parents had and all those kinds of things, they also had a new baby. My brother was less than 2 years older than me. No, wait, just over 2 years older than me. And
Gotcha.
so based on that, my mum was nursing effectively a baby while she was pregnant with me. She'd gone back to work. There were relationship struggles. There was mortgage pressure. It was like when interest rates were, I don't know, 17 or 19% or something.
Wow.
And so it's fair to assume that the stress hormones that were in my mum's bloodstream while she was pregnant with me would have been fairly high concentration.
Of cortisol.
Of cortisol. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So high concentrations of stress hormones in my mum's blood while she's pregnant with me. What does that actually mean? Well, I'm not born yet, but I'm alive. So what that high concentrations of stress hormones in my mother's bloodstream that comes via the placenta and signals to the developing fetus, you are going to be born into a highly stressful environment. So you need to wire your brain to be hypervigilant. And so that's why I'm super hypervigilant, and, you know, the empath and also being around people is exhausting because my nervous system is hardwired to be constantly perceiving threat. But where it becomes relevant to productivity is this. I learned in the womb, while I was having safety and closeness and connection to my mother, that those things happen in the presence of cortisol and stress hormones.
So what you're saying is you find, or the way that you were incubated, right, for argument's sake, was to sort of take something which is a stress hormone, which, yes, does give you dopamine, but to relate that into kind of a sense of safety. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's a sense of being alive, a sense of being connected. And so how crazy is this, right? All of a sudden, and research has shown this. There's neuroscience research out there now that has shown that people who had, and let's, for argument's sake, let's call this developmental trauma, because that's not a trauma. I didn't have to experience anything directly, but developmentally, because of some kind of external event that my mum might have been experiencing or whatever that was affecting her biochemistry, affected the way that my brain was developed in utero. And so research has shown now that even experiences before we are born via the placenta and via our mother's bloodstream, and in our early life experience, particularly our first 7 years, if we had, unpredictability or anything like that, energy in the home that felt like we were walking on eggshells, there's an ACEs, Adverse Childhood Experiences research was phenomenal if people want to look that up. But ultimately what that showed is this new neuroscience research shows that there is a particular network in the brain. And when that network comes online, that is like our sense of self is alive. It activates our frontal areas of our brain, which is really important in executive function and our ability to execute tasks. But for people who had brains that were wired in that way, when there was no threat, those networks were completely silent.
Oh, okay.
So you need your nervous system is literally hardwired that you need the presence of a threat in order to come online.
Okay. All right.
Whew.
So let me just, wasn't expecting that.
No, neither was I.
I feel the word unprecedented is coming to mind, but I'm not sure why. But really what you're sort of saying is when you look at your response to trying to do something, you have to look at what your body's feeling first and foremost, so in the moment, and not sort of judge it. Because there could be something that's happened in the past, whether it be something that you've directly and acknowledge that's happened, like a trauma that you can remember, or something that you may not have any intellectual knowledge of.
It could be at a DNA level from 5 generations ago.
So really, it's sort of like, and what you're then sort of saying for sort of like the neurodivergent, which you and I are, but I'm sure we have a neurotypical, listeners as well, that for say the neurodivergent, or for a certain, if you find yourself procrastinating, it could be that your body actually needs, from what you mentioned in the past, from those experiences, it needs you to get to that point to be able to activate the pathways to get you productive. Is that kind of what you're sort of saying?
Yep. So to be successful, you need threat, basically.
Yeah.
So all the productivity hacks in the world, they might set you up, and they might, like, they're the processes to support progress. But if your brain has been hardwired in that way, the only way to really be successful is to be under super high pressure and really, really, like cutting it down to the line every time.
Because that's quite interesting. So there's, I'll come back to myself, because there's two situations I'll get things done. One we've already spoken about, which is the procrastinate until the deadline looms, the deadline looms, and then off we go. The other thing is when I have an incredible amount of motivation to get something done. Now that motivation would be because I really love something, or I really want something to happen, and there's no procrastination whatsoever.
Yeah.
So
Because it's already rewarding.
okay, so what you're sort of saying, and I know we're diving deeply into the brain science at the moment, but is it because we're chasing the dopamine to get rewarded to then light these paths up, whether it be through procrastination to a point where cortisol gets to a certain level, cue dopamine? Or
to a point, yes.
Okay.
So in a very simplified way, yes, absolutely. But there's something else that I think is really relevant that we need to talk about. And it's what could be causing the procrastination in the first place. And there's a few different things here. And you mentioned before, that we are both neurodivergent. We may have neurotypical listeners. I talk about ADHD here because this is such a common thing for people with ADHD. But this behavior, you don't need an ADHD diagnosis to be able to observe this in yourself. And so I don't like pigeonholing people into just a label, for the simple fact that this is really taking an approach that this is just at a human behavior and human physiology level, regardless of a diagnosis, regardless of anything else. If you relate to this, then your brain is wired in this particular way, regardless of whether you have a diagnosis or not. And I think that's one really important point. But one of the
Yeah, and
things,
I'll just add to that when we talk about these things, some people might sort of start to tune out and go, "Oh, if that's an ADHD thing, I don't have ADHD. That's not for me." We're not saying
yeah.
that. We're
And
just
it's
sort of
also
saying
not saying that if you do this, then you should be diagnosed with ADHD. We're just simply saying
exactly.
it's not a cause and effect thing. It's simply
Yes,
saying this is something that's common in these people, but anyone can experience it. All right.
fantastic.
Thanks for clarifying. So there's a couple of things that I think are really important here. One is we've just had a look at the neurological and neurodevelopment perspective of procrastination and what's going on there and why that might happen. So that's really looking at it from a biological perspective. I also would like to look at this maybe from a mental perspective. Because mental, we established in an earlier episode, that one is purely talking about our physical body. So based upon the predetermined wiring of our body because of our early life experiences and even in the womb and our neurological development in the womb and early life, then this can cause this kind of behavior and these outcomes. But what about from a mental perspective? Because the mind is not the same as the nervous system. The mind does not have physical form. The mind is where we have our beliefs and we have the stories and we have our value systems and all these kinds of things. So from a mental perspective, why do we procrastinate?
And so just from the mind, just to, putting it out there, you're not talking about the brain itself.
No,
You're
no.
talking about thoughts, right? Because
Yes.
some people might say mind and brain are similar. You're talking about the mind, not the
Yes.
actual brain that can logically go through it. Yeah.
100%. And so the easiest way to differentiate that, as a neuroscientist, I've zapped lots of brains. I have looked at images of lots of brains, but I've never once located a thought. I've never once located a value because they are constructs. They don't exist in the physical realm. And so they are constructs of the mind, which transcends time and space, because our physical body is right here in this space at this time. But if I close my eyes, my mind transcends time and space. My mind can go back to 5th grade. My mind can go forward to 10 years from now. There's no time and space constraints in the mind. And that's fantastic. But one of the problems is that our body is the slave to the mind. So if my mind is living in a memory from the past, my body will remember and respond to that input. It might respond with whatever hormones or whatever feelings. And that's where sort of PTSD and things can come about. Totally different episode for that. We'll talk about that later. But the reason that it's important is because our body responds to activity of the mind, but they are not the same thing. And so from a mental perspective, if we think about our whole entire nervous system's goal is to keep us alive, so safety and survival, and it's not interested in short, like what's right or what's logical or what's reasonable. It's just literally interested in moving away from things that scare us or are uncomfortable and moving towards things that are comfortable, excite us, or, make us feel good. So fundamentally, at a basic level, that's what it's about. So boredom is the absolute arch enemy of procrastination. If we find something boring or mundane, that can be really, really, really difficult because boredom feels really unsafe to the nervous system because it's
Interesting.
uncomfortable. Being
Okay,
bored
so
is not comfortable.
because I've always associated being bored with just, how would you describe being bored? So like, if I had to think about what boredom is, it's the word worthless comes to mind. It's sort of like it's just not worth it. It's just it's not necessary. It's menial. It's but yeah, I've never thought of it as uncomfortable. It's just sort of like it's not. Maybe in my mind, boredom is not necessary for my survival. Like if it doesn't excite me or trigger me.
Variety is necessary for your survival. That's what I'm getting at. Variety is.
Ah.
Boredom is a threat to that. Because if you think about it, if I have nothing, if I have no interest in what I'm doing, or if I have nothing to do, I have to be present with discomfort. I have to do something I don't want to do. I have to do something I don't like, or I have to do nothing, and doing nothing feels really unsafe.
Because it's sucking away the opportunity of variety.
There's no distraction. There's a few different mechanisms there. So the first couple, I have to do something I don't like, or I have to do something I don't want to do. I mean, any human can relate to the uncomfortable feeling of dread of going, oh, I've got to do my bookkeeping and I really don't want to do that. Bookkeepers out there, I love you. I praise you. Thank you for being wired to find numbers exciting, because I sure as heck am not that person. But that's a completely different mechanism to having nothing to do, because nothing to do means there's no distraction and we have no choice but to be alone with ourselves. And that can be really uncomfortable. So boredom is a big one. But what about underlying fears? If we had a fear, I'll give you a personal example. And this is totally unconscious. It's not like we consciously every day go, I'm definitely not going to do that task today. We're going to put it on our to-do list and we're going to have good intentions. We're going to sit there and go, I really want to try and get that done today. But for me, one of my tasks was simply to just contact people that I've worked with. These people have had their entire lives changed. Like some of my clients have gone from not even being able to leave their house because anxiety was so severe to now running public like workshops and webinars where their face is out there and they're in front of crowds and they're talking in front of people. I've had clients not be able to drive their car and now they're going on long trips. Like all these amazing things, right? And all I had to do was to contact past clients and get them to ask them, invite them to jump on a video call with me and see if they wanted to share their story in their own words. And I put it off and put it off and put it off. And I would literally transfer it. Every single day I transferred that task from my to-do list for that day to my to-do list for the next day for like 3 or 4 months. And at the end of the day, I'd be like, oh, I was really busy. No, I ran out of time. No, I was too busy. No, the kids. Oh, school holidays. Oh, no, I had to file my fingernails and I had to pluck the hairs out of my leg with tweezers today because shaving, who shaves these days? Like you have to pluck them one by one with tweezers, right? Okay,
yeah,
so
block that out in the diary. Yep.
I didn't really pluck hairs one by one out of my legs, but that's the kind of ridiculous thing that I was doing. Or like scrolling social media or doing these mind-numbing things that are really just escapes. And we can lie to ourselves and say that we're really, really busy or we didn't get a chance. But actually, if the task really was aligned to our values and really was important to us, we would prioritize it. So I didn't do that for nearly 4 months. And when I sat with it one day, I was like, I am clearly procrastinating about this. And when I think about that task, it feels overwhelming. What is going on? And I closed my eyes and I sat with it. And what came up for me was that if I do this, if I capture the essence of people sharing their stories and I share that with the world, I completely lose control. There is no stopping this, because I know that when people share their stories from their own heart and other people hear them and they are inspired by that and they know in every cell of their body that what that person is sharing is going to work for them too, I felt like this was going to get way too big and I wouldn't be able to cope. Too many eyes would be on me. How would I cope with that potential criticism and fear of judgment and all that kind of stuff. And this massive feeling in my body of just suffocating fear came over me when I sat with this task of, if I did that, what would it mean? And so if I get these testimonials, what if people judge me? What if no one likes it? What if too many people love it? What if it gets so big that there's only one of me and I can't help everyone? What if I let people down? What if? And all of those what ifs shined a light on why I wasn't doing it. Because those what ifs, they are the discomfort that my nervous system says, hell no, get me away. I can't do that. I feel like I'm going to die if we do that. What if all these things happen? How about we just don't do it? I'm going to do you a favor. I'm going to do you a solid and we just won't do it. Hey? There you go. Binge watch Netflix on the couch.
Yep. Beautiful.
And that's what happens. So with the task, so with your task, and you come back, you said, was it corporate videos or whatever it was, you said editing. If you apply that to that, what could be the underlying what ifs?
Yeah, well, the underlying what ifs is, what if it's not good enough? What if they don't like it? What's the conversation I'm going to have if, because we haven't nailed every aspect of the video down, what if they've got this expectation which is too high? And they're the what ifs that generally come up for me that actually haven't come up ever.
So when you say they haven't come up ever, do you mean they haven't ever eventuated into real life?
Never eventuated into real life.
They've all
been
feel
stuck in my head.
Real to your nervous system because
Absolutely.
they're living in your mind. So
Absolutely.
if at some point in your earlier life, you have had an experience where something that you didn't get the reaction that you thought it might get, or something that you did was criticized by someone, or someone had a comment. And so you felt real discomfort and negative emotions in that moment. And so you go, that really didn't feel good. I never want to feel like that again. I know if I just never actually take action on doing this task, then no one has to give me feedback. And if no one has to give me feedback, then I'm really safe. Except it means that you can never move forward. You can never actually achieve your goals.
And so for myself, when I've realized all of that through the work that I've been doing so far, is that it was the fear of not being good enough, which actually stemmed from never or not feeling understood when I was young. And so it started off with not feeling understood. Therefore, if I wasn't being understood, if I was understood, because people would then be able to relate to me, and I'd be good enough, as opposed to them constantly questioning. Now, if they're questioning me, it's not necessarily because they want to judge me or do things like that. They're asking questions because they're trying to figure out what's going on, because I wasn't like the rest of my family. And so then it moved into not being good enough. And it wasn't until you start to unpack these that you really then start to go, oh, that's why. But it's taken me quite a long time, and quite a long time of sitting in the discomfort, which is everyone's going to have to go through that, or are going through that as they're healing, to get that clarity. But one thing I wanted to circle back to is, we've got people here who have found this podcast or this show because we're talking about productivity hacks that aren't working. And a bit like you and me, they're either a student, they're either at work, they're either a parent, or that everyone's faced with having to get something done that they don't want to get done, whether they're being forced to, whether they're being paid to do it, whether it's just a necessary thing because if you don't clean the kitchen, it simply doesn't clean itself, or whatever it is. So we then go back to some of these productivity hacks. Okay, I'm going to write a list. It's the simplest form, right? I'm going to write a list of things that I should be doing. Oh, great. That feeling of empowerment that I'm now getting because I'm going to get it done, because you're trying to picture yourself getting it done and da-da-da-da-da. And then if that doesn't work, you might find an app, because God knows there's a lot of apps for all of these different things. And then especially say for your students out there that have the assignment that they want to get done that bores the living snot out of them, right? That they have to get done and they've got a month to go. It's sort of like, what are some of the things that we can help these people with? I think overall we've talked about there's probably something about fear that's slowing you down. Or it could be, if it's not fear, maybe you actually need that really short deadline to get it done. But it seems counterintuitive. Yeah, so like, wouldn't you just feel better if you had a month and it only took you 2 days to do it at the start of the month and then it's all done? Well, I've not been able to figure that out for myself.
Yes.
Maybe I need to do it at the last 2 days. And that's okay. That's actually not something wrong with you. That's your body telling you what it needs to get this thing done, because there's no motivation, there's no reward. It's okay.
There's no pressure.
There's no pressure.
Yeah.
And so, but
I was just going to say, so when you realize that your brain is pressure to your brain is reward, that's when you start to really understand yourself. Not to all people. If pressure seems like it activates the reward centers of your brain because your patterns of behavior point towards that, then whether you like it or not, whether you think that you had a great childhood, whether you can't think of any kind of traumatic event or anything like that, is completely redundant. If your brain is seeing pressure as rewarding, your brain is wired according to the wiring of developmental trauma. And that might not even be yours. It might be intergenerational. It might be from while you were in the womb and your mum was really stressed. My firstborn child is like this. I was doing my PhD 10 years ago. I was working like 16 to 18-hour days, most days. I was like, it was super stressful time of my life. And I was in a marriage that was like really quite toxic, really unhealthy. And I hadn't done any healing yet. So my son was predisposed to having a nervous system that is hypervigilant. And then my daughter, by the time she was born, I'd already commenced my healing journey. The experience of life was completely different. And I was nowhere near as stressed in my time with my pregnancy with her. And her ability to be regulated, her ability to feel safe in her environment. She just chose to change schools recently. Even though she loved her current school, she chose to change schools to go to the same school as her brother, where she knew no one. I was certain that she would change her mind because I thought she wouldn't want to leave her friends. And every day she was like, I'll make new friends. It's okay. I'll make new friends. She's 6 years old. And I look at that and go, dude, your nervous system wiring is pretty freaking good. Because the uncertainty of that, the change, the uprooting of that, like that's, and for her just to be like, why do you think that's supposed to be hard or stressful? Like, it just makes no sense. I'll make friends. That's such a weird thing for you to worry about, Mum.
And it's quite beautiful, because when you think about what people accept or what is normal behavior, right? From a society point of view, normal behavior would not dictate that you need to have this sort of massive pressure to get something done, because if that's the case, then what's the difference between you and an adrenaline junkie?
Yeah.
And so when someone looks at, what's an adrenaline junkie? Well, they're volatile. They're unpredictable. They're not reliable, because they're always chasing the next hit. But it's a very extreme way. But yes, it's sort of like they are one in the same, but it's not the fact that it's something bad. It's just maybe the way it works. So when then people have this expectation, if you need to do your assignment, what the normal person will do is be given an assignment. They've got 4 weeks. They'll do a little bit each day, each week, and it will be then built on the assignment's done on a linear way. That's what's normal. That's what the teachers would like. That's what parents would
I'll
like.
say that's as a university lecturer for 12 years, that is
Mm.
definitely not the norm. I can absolutely guarantee it. Is it what I would like? Absolutely yes.
But you understand
It's
what
not,
I'm. It's
not
like it's sort
normal.
of like there's this judgment of what's normal. If you
Yeah.
ask anyone, okay, your assignment is to tell me over 4 weeks how you would do an assignment.
Yeah.
They're going to go, well, I would write down that I'd do a little bit each day because that's what's going to, not just sort of go all the way till the last 2 days and go and jam it all in that way.
Yeah.
So then suddenly when you're looking at that, you're also judging yourself. And so I suppose it's about understanding that you might be wired that way, or it could be that with the looking of, or the looking back through maybe a fear that's leading to the procrastination, and you need the cortisol for the dopamine from the procrastination to get higher than the fear itself to get it done. If you can work through the fear, maybe you don't need as much cortisol next time to get it done.
Oh, 100%. So I love that you've taken us there, because that's, I think, how we land this ship. So there's two aspects to that. One is, if you've related to this content and you've identified yourself in this content, amazing. Play to your strengths. So when I was a uni lecturer, one of the things that I did in my highly, highly complex, so I had assignments that were very complex because of the nature of the work that I do. But I played on my understanding of the neuroscience of learning and human behavior. And I set up assignments in a certain way that resulted in setting my students up for success, knowing how their brains were likely wired. So one of the things that I did is I made deadlines every week. So the assignment didn't change. The assignment, that what they had to produce at the end, was exactly the same. The due date was exactly the same, except I had assignments due. I'd broken it into parts, and I gave them a deadline every single week. Now, if they didn't submit it, there was no necessary punishment as such. But the fact that there was a deadline, I gave them like half a mark. If you imagine half a mark out of 100 marks, that's stuff all.
But still, it's still accountability. It's still pressure.
Half a mark a week for them to submit. I called them progressive assessments, for them to submit their progress, their completed progress on that step. And the uptake was like 98, 99%. So it wasn't even about like giving them more marks, giving them more money, giving them more this money in a workplace situation. It's just about understanding human psychology and human behavior. And so by giving them that deadline, I created the perception of pressure, which opened up, which gave them access to their executive function, which allowed them to be productive, which allowed them to have that network online. It was phenomenal. So that was one thing, guys. Create accountability. Create something where you go, I'm going to book myself a weekend trip to the beach, but I can only go if I have this done. If I don't have it done, I can't go.
Ooh, okay.
So, or I'm going to go and create your carrot, create your reward. But the condition of that reward is that you cannot do it, you cannot have it, you cannot go until it's done, because that will work with your neurological wiring to support your productivity. And there's lots of little hacks like that are very different to the apps and very different to the planners and very different to everything else. But it's a hack that's based on your unique brain wiring that you need at the moment to be able to get things done. But the point that you made is, if you can resolve the fears, that's the ultimate. So I think where we kind of land this is, one of the things that we spoke about was being able to optimize productivity long term. So that's just a short-term productivity hack. But what if we didn't have to hack productivity? What if we could optimize your productivity long term so that your executive function was just part of your daily life? So that being online without needing stress and pressure and mayhem in your life was your natural, normal baseline. And that is where mind, body, spirit healing comes in. So the entire basis of what I do, and again, from a research perspective, I accidentally, during my PhD, I accidentally found, so my PhD was all about how do we rewire the brain in response to new experiences. And I chose to do that in older adults because there was a belief at the time that old adults' brains cannot change because they are hardwired. And I was like, watch me. So I did a whole heap of different interventions with older adults, and I measured their brain activity, and I measured the physiology of their brain to measure whether their brains were actually physically changing and physiologically changing. And because I mentioned before I was pregnant during my PhD, and because I had a deadline of having a baby, I had no choice but to get all my participants in each group to come at the same time. And so, because I didn't have the time to train people one-on-one, to do the interventions one-on-one, it was a 12-week intervention and they had to do it 3 times a week. And so they did it in groups. It was group training. And one of the completely unexpected findings of my PhD is that everyone's physiology completely changed. They all experienced neuroplasticity. And in the literature, the mediator of neuroplasticity, the ability of our brain to physically change, is dopamine. So when people don't respond to an intervention, when they gave them a medication for promoting dopamine, all of a sudden the people who didn't respond to changing their brain became responders to the exact same intervention. And so what that taught me is that being in community with people who are aligned in their intention, who are safe, who are connected, increases your oxytocin. It's a safe environment. And dopamine is released off the back of oxytocin. And therefore, your brain can be rewired. And so when I'm having an initial consultation with someone, I'll be asking them questions about their parents' relationship while they were pregnant. What might have been happening in your parents' lives? Did you have older siblings? Because that tells me maybe mum was really busy with a newborn when she was pregnant with you. Maybe dad was never around and mum was alone with 3 other kids. Maybe mum was working full time and working 4 jobs and dad, it gives me context to understand how might your nervous system have been formed in the womb and in your early life.
Yeah, which up until now, all of these things would have been just sort of like, are you looking to blame somebody else?
Yeah, it's not about that.
And it's
not
not.
about that
And it's sort of like, why is this relevant? Can't you just focus on the fact that I have a hard time completing assignments that I hate doing?
Exactly. And so what that tells me then is about getting an understanding of how is your nervous system wired, because that tells me whether that person is going to see better results in a group program. And these people, I have never been able to replicate the results that I see in my group program one-on-one with people who have that particular brain wiring, because they need the dopamine to come from oxytocin, which comes from community and safe connection with others.
Right. So what you're saying is people like that actually get a better result sharing in a group environment than taking we'll say the premium one-on-one.
Yep.
They get better results.
I could charge more than double the amount to work with that person one-on-one, but I would never recommend, even though it could earn me more money, I would never recommend one-on-one services for people who are identifying with that kind of brain wiring, for the simple fact that I know that their brain needs to learn how to rewire in the safety of presence and connection with others, so that the oxytocin can produce the dopamine. And what that does is it stops the brain trying to jump off the back of cortisol and adrenaline to release the dopamine. And so then you can experience presence and connection more in your daily life. Your executive function on a day-to-day basis improves. Your ability to execute tasks, even if you find them boring, is better. It's flipping unbelievable.
And I think we need to save that for another episode, because one question I would be posing to all of this is, for someone who's working through all of this, and maybe they struggle with a sense of self, maybe they struggle with the fear of rejection, maybe they struggle with the fact that they've been playing it small. How do you feel that safety in a group of people?
Yes. You go to a group that is specifically designed for optimizing human behavior, human psychology. And so it's the simple things like, I do the group online. Why do I do it online? Because people are sitting on their couch, on their bed, in their car. We're in their safe space. If their nervous system is safe, the cortisol's not there. I do the group program. What was the other point I was going to make?
Well, I think the other thing that I'm starting to pick up here is as well, if you're going to be fearful about sharing in front of people, which if you have any of the things I mentioned before, you're going to feel apprehensive. But over time, as you share, and the practice of sharing, and I know you've said this before separately and offline, the more you share, that practice itself allows you to be able to be more comfortable with those people. As they share, you share, and a bond builds, and the safety builds, and the cortisol drops. And what was that chemical that you were talking about? The oxytocin then rises to then bring the dopamine in. So it's not that sort of thing where you create an experiment where you take someone who's unsure and not feeling safe, stick them with 5 strangers, and suddenly they feel safe. No, that's not what happens.
No. It doesn't work. It's learned. It's
so it
part
happens
of the
through
rewiring. When you learn, I've had people not speak up until like they show up. There's a difference between showing up but not feeling safe to speak yet, and not showing up. So that was the other point that I was going to make, is that another thing is that I have an absolute strict rule that there's no lurkers. And what I mean by a lurker is, if you are in the program, you are in the program. If you can't show up live, you are present in the group. Because what's the difference between me speaking, sharing in front of people who I don't know, who are not familiar to me, who I'm uncertain about, as opposed to me sharing the exact same thing in the exact same way with people who are all close to me, all safe people, and who I'm connected to? The first one, we feel safe sharing in an environment where they're safe people and we know them and there's certainty. But as soon as someone becomes audience, we feel unsafe. And so it's not about, like, rewiring the brain doesn't have to be about sharing every time and speaking up and being really vocal and telling everyone the issues. It's about just being in the presence of safe people, still doing the processing, still working through your own stuff, working through the own trauma and all the stuff that comes up during the program. But it might be, week 9 by the time you speak up for the first time. But by everyone else being present, everyone else holding space, everyone else sharing, your brain is on a persistent rewiring journey that says people are safe, I'm safe. And what does that change? If all of a sudden your brain is now wired to people are safe, I'm safe, everything's okay, are you still then afraid of people judging you? That drastically decreases. It's
powerful.
So powerful.
Very, very powerful. All right, so I think it's been another massive topic. Love this. But really, to wrap things up for everybody, productivity hacks help when it comes to being organized. Productivity hacks don't help you feeling bored. Productivity hacks don't make you like something that you don't necessarily like at a fundamental level. And if you are overwhelmed, if you are having procrastination, look at why that might be. And don't judge yourself if you do need that extra, we'll call it adrenaline, to be able to get something out. That's not a bad thing. But also look at it, if you are in a job and specifically in a job where most of the tasks that you're doing are boring and you're unfulfilled, look at that. No productivity hack's going to fix that. What is it that's keeping you in that job? What is it that you want that job for? And if you're feeling overly unfulfilled, move on. And so, look, I was the worst student you could ever have, right? But it's one of those things where you do need to get through it. And so there's no magic bullet with that, but it's finding some meaning in there to try and make it a little bit less boring. And if you do need to wait until 10 o'clock on a Sunday night to get the assignment done so you can hand it in on Monday morning, okay, deal with it. But try and find the assignments that are interesting, put your everything into it to try and sort of balance it out. And I think that's probably where we'll wrap it up there, Ash. Is there anything else you wanted to sort of say in closing?
No, I love that. I think the only thing that came to mind as you were speaking then is explore the what ifs. What are the what ifs that your mind is actually afraid of? And when you can understand what those what ifs are, close your eyes and just ask. What do I need to know to not be afraid of that? And as soon as those fears are gone, so for me, as soon as the fears that I had around those testimonial processes and everything else went away, I actioned it. It took me literally 30 minutes. I'd put it off for 4 months and it took me 30 minutes. So be gentle with yourself, be kind with yourself, but take accountability and responsibility. Observe your behaviors, observe your actions, get an understanding of what are the tasks that you just dread doing. And then start to get a sense of, well, how can I make this task less boring? And so that's how can I bring fun and creativity into it? And also, if there's
those tighter deadlines. I love that fact that you did that. Tighter deadlines. Yeah.
Tighter deadlines, and explore the fears. If there are any fears that would make that seemingly safe task feel unsafe, because there might be judgment, there might be criticism, there might be rejection, then explore that, because as soon as you resolve the root issue, the sense of threat goes away and you're free to do the task.
Beautiful. Well, everybody, that wraps up today's episode. If you liked it, give us a thumbs up, hit the subscribe, check us out on the socials. Looking forward to talking to you next week, Ash.
Yes.
Guarantee it's going to be...
This was our first ever episode inspired by a listener. So,
that's right. I forgot to mention that.
Yeah, one of our listeners actually said, I would really love you guys to talk about overwhelm and procrastination. Obviously, it might be something that this person was struggling with in their life and just wanted to understand more. And we were like, heck yeah, thanks for the feedback. We would love to chat about that. So
how all that ties into productivity, right? Yeah.
And so, guys, if there is anything that is burning in your mind, if there's a question of why am I like this? Why do I do this? Why can't I do that? Why is this hard for me? Send it through. Send it through on our socials, or you can email hello@re-mind.institute, and we would love to answer those questions for you and deep dive into them.
And all that's in the show notes on the podcast or in the description below on YouTube. Very well said. Drop us some comments and we'll see you next week.
Yeah.
Bye. Bye-bye.